I interviewed a witch. So I had an interview over on my podcast, the Allegedly Possibly Maybe podcast, at my podcast. Go and check it out, link down below. I interviewed a witch, and it was one of the most incredible conversations I have genuinely ever had with another human being. And there was a part of that interview that was all about the Salem witch trials. Now, the Salem witch trials is something that I've wanted to cover on this channel before, but I thought, well, you've just interviewed an actual practicing witch, and she has talked in detail about the Salem witch trials. So why don't you just take that part of the podcast and show everyone here today? So, from the mouth of an actual witch, this is the Salem witch trials.
Have you looked into the Salem witch trials and things like that? The history
I
of it?
have. So my job is I'm actually a heritage guide for Great Yarmouth.
Mm-hmm.
So we go out and we do history walks for people.
Oh, yeah. Cool.
And my speciality is gory stories.
Fantastic.
So I have really researched the East Anglia witch trials because, again, a lot of people don't know there's a huge link between Salem and Great Yarmouth.
Is there actually?
Okay. There is. So
Nice.
3 women who were accused of witchcraft at Salem were born in Great Yarmouth.
No way.
Yeah.
For those that don't know, although I know many do, that's mine and Lozzie's stomping ground.
Yeah.
So there's a link here. That's fascinating. So they were born in Yarmouth, went over, and what happened?
So basically what Salem was, it wasn't because these women were practicing witches, because they weren't. They were of the Puritan faith, and again, you've got to look at the times and what was going on in the world.
Yeah.
So if I just quickly give you a little bit of backstory with the East Anglian witch trials and Matthew Hopkins.
Yeah.
It was during the midst of the English Civil War.
Right.
And there was a lot of famine and hunger and infighting. And if you look at any kind of conflict, there's always going to be a group of people who are persecuted.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately it happened to be poor women who are either widowed or spinsters. So if we go over to Salem.
Sorry to interrupt. What's the definition for a spinster?
So it's an unmarried woman.
Right. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So then if we go over to Salem and you're in this puritanical faith, and basically the accusations aimed at the women and the couple of men as well who were executed at Salem, it was all to do with land grabbing. Right. So the 3 women who were accused from Great Yarmouth were Rebecca Nurse, Mary Eastie, and Sarah Cloyce. And they were sisters. They were known as the Town Sisters. Born here, you can look them up in the parish records. Born here in Great Yarmouth, then moved over to Salem. And it was the Putnam family who accused Mary Eastie and Rebecca Nurse of bewitching their children purely because they wanted the land that Rebecca Nurse was living on. Wow. Now, Rebecca Nurse's story is heartbreaking. Now, she wasn't a young lady. She was 72, so she'd lived out her life. She'd got married. She'd had children. And she was a very, very religious woman. So to be accused of being a witch at that time was heinous. And there was uproar from the villagers, saying, how can she be a witch? She's this, pious woman. And she was actually found not guilty to begin with. But the accusers were sat in the same room and started throwing themselves on the floor and saying, oh, she's doing this to us.
Oh, my God.
So the jury had to change their mind and she was found guilty.
When was this? What was the period?
Was it 1600s?
So 1692 was the Salem witch trials. The East Anglian witch trials were 1645 to 1647. So it's sort of the mid to the end of the 1600s and the 17th century.
It's not that long ago in the terms of like...
I know, it's crazy, isn't it?
Do you know what I mean?
That you can throw yourself on the floor and be like, she's doing this
it's
to
only
me.
really a few generations back, isn't it? It's not that. It's not
Crazy,
like it's like
it?
thousands of years ago.
It's crazy.
So, and you find that with any kind of witch trials, if you look at sort of the height of them, It's really interesting. History is fascinating. I love it. So even, I mean, the witch hysteria in England didn't really start until sort of James I came to the throne in 1603. And he'd already started persecuting witches in Scotland. And then sort of the witch hunts kind of ramped up a little bit here in England.
Yeah.
But again, Matthew Hopkins we go back to what we were saying about earlier with the good and bad within any religion and the extremists. And Matthew Hopkins was an extreme Puritan.
Yeah.
You know, and the Puritan faith really didn't, I wouldn't say not like women. It was thought that women were more susceptible to like the work of the devil.
Yeah.
So, you know, and that's kind of where the witch trials in East Anglia came from, you know. And he was never actually officially given the title of Witchfinder General. He was he took it upon himself. He was self-professed Witchfinder General.
That was a thing. Witchfinder General.
And is it punishable by death? Was that the? Or...
So prior to James I coming to the throne, what would happen was if you were accused of witchcraft, you would go to local court. If you pleaded guilty, you were fine. You'd be fined and you'd be let off.
Okay, yeah.
However, if you were then brought up on the same charge, and you pleaded guilty again, it was then punishable by death. You'd be hanged.
So you got one chance.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah.
And is this could be a misconception? Wasn't it a fact that sometimes in order to prove that a woman was a witch, they'd, for example, tie rocks to their feet, throw them in a lake, and then if they survived, they were a witch? Like stupid backwards things like that. If you hung the woman and she survived, she's a witch. It was like, well, yeah, if you're wrong, so is that true? Is there truth in that?
So there were cases of what was known as ducking, and what they would do is they would tie a rope around the accused's waist. They would then sit them cross-legged. They would tie bound their hands together like that.
Yeah.
And then what they would do is they would take the little finger and they would tie it to the opposite big toe. They would then chuck them into a body of water. And again, if they floated, they were a witch. If they sank, they were innocent and they had to be pulled out very, very quickly before they drowned.
Right.
But there was loads of absolutely despicable methods used. I mean, when I do the Gory Stories walk, I take people through some of the things that would have made them be accused of being a witch. So, for instance, if you can't recite the Lord's Prayer word for word.
Jesus.
Yeah.
I'd be a witch for sure.
Saying the alphabet backwards, which at a time where most people were illiterate, was another one. If you had a cat or a dog or a bird that you talked to,
I'd be screwed.
I'd be finished.
I'd be
that.
screwed.
Yeah.
I've always talked to my cats.
If you had moles or skin tags, that was skin tags especially was classed as the devil's teat, because that's where the devil would feed from you.
Really?
And then one of my favourites that I do to freak people out, because, you know, I have an upper arm disability. I say, if you had extra digits or you had fingers missing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you'd be accused of being a witch.
Jesus.
But you are one. But you are a witch.
Yeah. So, and like I said, ducking was just one of the methods used to get to see if they were a witch. But in order to get like confessions out of them, you know, there'd be sleep deprivation, food deprivation. You'd have Matthew Hopkins actually invented a witch pricking device, which was basically a retractable knife that he pressed against the skin. The blade would retract into the handle, and thus proof that a witch didn't bleed. You know, because they didn't bleed when they were pricked with this knife, therefore they were a witch.
They're all backwards.
Thank you for watching, guys. I really do appreciate it. I hope that you enjoyed. If you did, please hit that like button, subscribe, share the video. Also, go check out my podcast. And if you would like more elements of that interview, or just straight up the whole interview on this channel, let me know down below in the comments section. Thank you so much. Thank you to Becky the Witch as well for coming onto my podcast. I want to interview all sorts of interesting and amazing people on that podcast. I'm trying to get a Satanist priest. That's the next guest I have locked on in my sights. But yeah, look forward to that, guys. Look forward to more content, of course, on this channel as always. Check out my Facebook page as well. Check out all the links down below. Thank you so much, guys.